Don't believe the lie that your book is for everybody. My guest in this episode of Passing the Torch is a multiple New York Times, USA Today bestselling author and founder and chief story architect of Storybuilders, a creative team of storytellers who share his passion for helping people live a story worth telling and serving them with excellence and genuine high trust relationships. In his new book, Your Story Advantage, with a foreword from Lewis Howes, shows a proven path to build instant credibility that positions you as the go-to expert in your field. He's worked with John C. Maxwell, Dean Graziosi, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, Passing the Torch with Bill Blankschaen starts now. First and foremost, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me.
Well, great to be here, Martin. I'm thrilled to be in the room with the man who is in the arena, holding the torch, carrying it forward. Yep, who's doing the work. And wow, it's a privilege to be with you.
That means a lot. Thank you for that. We were just chatting a little bit offline. This podcast has become, a passion. It's always been a passion. It's become a mission. It's something I can feel in my guts, more than the pancakes that we just talked about as well. But
yeah.
No, and I know about the passion. I know you can relate to that. When something inside of you, right?
Yeah. I totally can. Oh my goodness, can I? I call it your meaningful message. Like, what is that that's burning inside your soul that you just feel like you've got to do something with? I can tell you how that affected my life, if you don't mind. I'll tell you a little bit of how I got into all this. Actually, I think it's a perfect example. So there was a time when I had helped start a private school and I was leading it, and I was getting hugs from kindergartners every day and guiding teenagers into their next life phase and working with families.
Was this in Ohio?
This was in Ohio. Yeah. So I was doing good work, and in that sense, I felt I was making an impact, but I still felt like this burning within me, like, oh, this is good, but it's not your best. Because, for my whole life, I had thought I was a writer, and I told people I'm a writer, but I wasn't actually writing. I told people I'm a storyteller, but I'm not actually telling stories right now. And so eventually I had to realize I didn't want to look back at the end of my life and say I was regretful, that I wish I had done something with that. And I realized someone else can run the school, but no one else can fulfill the calling that I'm feeling within me, this message burning within me, right? So I let go of the school, stepped out into the unknown to pursue this. We had 6 kids. Went a year with no income, but I never worked harder in my life, quite honestly, Martin. It was just like I studied, first of all, I created book proposals, talked to everybody in the publishing industry, like all the whole storytelling space. I just was nonstop working on it, studied the art and science of storytelling, what it comes down to, and just put all that together. And at the end of that, well, first of all, it was not easy, as you can imagine, right? Yeah. I remember one day in particular, I was sitting out in the backyard, beautiful Ohio day, and I'm writing this book idea. And on the outside, it's like sunny and the birds are chirping and it's a beautiful day and it's awesome. But on the inside, like the biggest fears in the world were like coming down the road at me on a semi truck loaded with steel with no brakes, kind of thing, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna end up sleeping under a bridge in a box somewhere. How's this gonna work out?
Box builders. You can be box builders.
We could have started box builders at that time, yeah. But I kept going. The man in the arena, right? It was bloody. It was not literally, but metaphorically, it was a tough time. Kept going, moving forward, and from that, actually wrote a book. The book I was working on that day actually got picked up by a publisher. I wrote the book and realized I'm really good at it. And then started helping other people write their books. And one thing led to another. And then Storybuilders came out of that. And then since then, like you said, we're working with people like Lewis and John and Dean and all those kind of guys, but also everybody in between who's like building something and realizing my story has value. And if I tell it well, I can make a greater impact. Because I think the big breakaway truth for me that came from that whole experience was that I believe your breakthrough begins when you start with your story. When you're willing to lean into that and embrace, all right, this is who I am, and I'm going to live that out and take ownership of it, that's when things start to change. It certainly did for me. And I just think that each and every person has a story within them. And we can go into what we mean by story, but everybody has it. And so it's already in them. They just have to tap into it and figure out how do I leverage that well. That's why I wrote Your Story Advantage, to take the last 12 years of all I've learned and put it into a easily digestible book form.
I definitely want to jump into your book, but I just, you talked about, you said something that, because it applies so much to me. So you had 6 kids and you went a year without income, and you didn't have did you have any time of like retirement pension or anything coming in?
No, this was a private school. It was a private Christian school, right? So it was like a ministry mindset. You didn't go into it to make money in the first place, right? So no, and in fact, my wife had some side income at the time, and both of our incomes on the same day went to zero, and through circumstances that were disconnected, right? So we pulled the kids in, sat them all on the bed, and say, "Look, kids, this is where we're at. This is what Dad's trying to do. This is what that looks like." And we're going to walk this out, right? I mean, walk it out by faith and walk it out together.
6 growing kids, right? So, constant,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Food alone is ridiculous, but
yeah, it was fun.
So, I mean, because the reason I just wanted to ask you that, because my income's about to be,
Sure.
I'm going to get a pension from the military,
Sure.
but it's a lot less than what I'm making now.
Sure.
But it's like, man, I don't want to go right back into another job. I want to do this podcast thing, but I'm not making income from podcasts. But it's kind of, in order to do that, I have to focus on it.
Yeah.
So it's just, how did you find that courage? Especially, what was that conversation with your wife? How did you guys get on the same page with that? Because that's a team effort.
Yeah, I think it was an ongoing conversation. So I'm going to answer that in a couple of ways. One, the years leading up to that, I had done a lot of work studying myself, understanding myself, and I developed what I called a strength statement of I realized that I'm at my best when I'm creatively questioning, connecting, and communicating in the context of my beliefs. And each one of those words came to have a meaning for me based on my skill set and my passions and all that stuff coming together. And so all of that led to the reality that in my current role, I wasn't really doing that. And so I was doing good, but I need to do something different.
Yeah.
And so when I chose to step out, I don't recommend this approach for everybody. For me, it was I just had this sense that I couldn't stay where I was. And so I had to make a move. In fact, I remember speaking to the head of the school at the time when we were talking about this idea. And he said, well, what's the worst case scenario for you? And I said, the worst case is that a year from now, I'm still doing what I'm doing. And I still haven't followed the calling within me. That's the worst case. And at that point, it became clear, all right, then, I need to follow this calling. It was burning within me. But the conversation with my wife, first, she's always been super supportive. And she could tell I was being intentional about it. I didn't have all the answers, but I was being intentional. And I think our faith was really behind it. And by that, I mean our faith in God. But also, when I talk about faith, I don't just mean religious faith. I mean just faith in doing what you believe to be true, right? That's how I define faith, doing what you believe to be true, often in spite of what you see, sense, or feel, right? So acting that out. And I like to say, you don't know what you believe about yourself until you act on it, right? Until then, it's all just nice words that fit on a poster kind of thing.
Yeah.
Push comes to shove. Now, the one thing I will say is that ended up happening was, I actually explored a couple, full-time jobs while I was in that, thinking, all right, well, maybe I need to go that route. But what ended up happening was I began to do little side hustles, little side things, side projects, picking up side projects while I figured it out, the best path forward. And that ended up giving me the freedom to experiment with this, experiment with that. Right. So it isn't for anybody in that position. I don't suggest just stepping out and doing nothing. Like I said, I never worked harder in my life that whole year. And then trying things and doing this and learning from it and adjusting and tweaking. And then as you're moving forward, you begin to see more of what it could look like.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with the podcast, is I know what I could do if I need time, actual time throughout the day to focus on it. But no, that's great. I appreciate that insight.
Yeah. You need a book, by the way. I know. I'm going to send you.
Yeah, please do.
And
please do.
The reason I say that is because chapters 1 and 2 are all about getting clear on your meaningful message, like getting clear on exactly what that is that you're going after, and then beyond that, giving you structure, what to do with it and all that. But that is, I mean, it's not just you, it's all of us. We all have to get that clarity, and that clarity then drives us forward.
No, I love it. Speaking of that, it's a perfect segue. I do want to dive right into your book, Your Story Advantage: A Proven Path to Maximize Your Impact, Influence, and Income. You say that breakthrough begins when we start with our story. What do you think holds most people back from recognizing the value in their own story?
Yeah.
And how can they begin to overcome that internal resistance?
Yeah, I'd say that there's two big ones. I talk about 5 story traps in the book, but there's 2 really big ones. The one is the confidence trap that holds people back. The first is we tend to deify others and worship them, but we diminish ourselves. Right. And so we tend to think, oh, they're amazing, they're awesome, they've got a great story. Well, of course, people should listen to them. But me, I don't really have that much to say, and I think that's built into all of us. Essentially, we all have this default. I'll just diminish myself and put myself down. But one thing I've learned from working with people from LA to New York and everywhere in between, big names, small names, people are people.
Yeah.
The people that we look up to and say, oh, they're amazing, they must have something different. No, they're people just like everybody else,
Yeah.
but they've been intentional about their story. That's the key. They've been intentional about becoming the person they want to be. And how am I telling my story? And what does that look like? I'll share this story with you, Martin. I was having lunch with somebody in New York City one time. And if I shared her name, everybody listening to this would immediately recognize the name. But she confided something in me as we were talking. She said, I get invited into big boardrooms and all these big conversations, and they pay me a lot of money to share what I think. And I tell them, she said, but I got to tell you, a lot of times I just don't feel confident that they actually want to hear what I have to say. I think they're more about getting me with my last name into the room. And I thought, well, here's someone who everyone would think, oh, this person's made it, they've arrived, they're super successful. And she's wrestling with, but no, do I really have confidence in putting out in the world what I want to say? It's the same thing everybody else is wrestling with. So, I think the confidence trap is one. The normalcy trap, that's another one. And that's simply that, what feels normal to you can actually add a lot of value to somebody else. But because it feels normal, we just don't value it. It's Martin, you've been in the Air Force for what, 23 years, 22 years?
23 years. Yep.
Wow. Talk about amazing experience. I mean, there are so many people in the world that would benefit from hearing your perspective on that. And we could go right down the line of your expertise and the experiences and so forth.
Yeah. And I was an intelligence analyst for the Air Force throughout my career.
So much about that. And then combine that with your passions, and it feels normal to you. Like when you say that, I have all kinds of questions that come to mind. Like, wow, what was that about?
Yeah.
But it feels normal to you, right? And for me, I talked to somebody the other day, running a nonprofit organization for a dozen years back in the day. It's like they were like, "Oh, I'm trying to start a nonprofit," and I hopped on a call and just give them some advice. Of, here's my thoughts, and I realized, oh, I actually do have a lot to share in that space. It feels normal to me, right? So,
yeah.
So I think those are the big ones. I lack confidence, and it just feels normal, so nobody would want to pay for that or read about that or anything like that. But the reality is people do.
The book also introduces a concept of a story ecosystem trademark. That's a trade. Yes. I want to make sure I get that. But that term or that phrase really, it's eye catching. Obviously it's something I've never seen in most people. Right. But,
Sure.
Can you walk us through like what that looks like in practice, and how can someone can start building one to turn the message into a business or a brand?
Yeah. Well, first thing they do is they can buy the book and it'll explain all that.
Yeah.
But imagine 3 circles that keep expanding outward, right? As you go. And this is your story ecosystem. It's a living, breathing ecosystem that is how you build a business around your brand, around your story. And the first circle at the center is, I call it your message maker. That's your brand story, chapter 3 in the book. Getting clear on what your message is, who you're talking to, who you're not talking to. and how to tell your story in a powerful way. This is for individuals or organizations, all the above, applying this. Once you get clear on that message, then your message multiplier is that second expanding circle. Your influence is expanding. Message multiplier, typically in the form of a book. And a book has that power. It can go places you'll never go, and it can touch more people than you'll ever know. And so far beyond what you can do as a person, your book starts pushing out there into the world. And then the third level is monetizing that message, your message monetizers. Once you're clear on that message, then it could be coaching programs, it could be workshops, it could be trainings, digital courses. The list is endless of all the options. And I unpack each of those in the book in detail. Here's how you do it in order to do it. But that's what that story ecosystem, it's a way of thinking about how you're going to leverage your story to share it with the world. Archimedes, you may probably heard this quote, like Archimedes used to say, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to put it, and I can move the world. And I view your story as like lengthening that lever, making that lever long.
Yeah.
Now you can do incredible things that you never thought you could before. They get easier because you're leaning into that.
No, I love it. And I've been reading a lot about you and just listening to you on a couple different podcasts and stuff. So I've been excited just getting to a couple different things with you.
Yeah.
One thing I heard you say, I think it was actually in the Storybuilders podcast. By the way, I forget the two young guys that did the episode. They did a fantastic job. They were phenomenal as interviewers and
Awesome.
the research and everything. So shout out to you guys.
Awesome.
What comes to mind when I say shadow calling?
Shadow calling, Stephen Pressfield actually is the one who originated this idea. At least that's where I got it from. And that is, you're pursuing a calling that feels similar, close to what your true calling is. Like it's close enough to scratch the itch a little bit and make it feel like maybe this is close enough. When I was leading the school, for example, right, that was a shadow calling for me. I was doing good work, but it wasn't my best. But I think most people settle for good instead of continuing to pursue the best. And what happens when you do that is, because you're no longer being challenged and stretched and moving forward at that pace, you begin to coast. And coasting only goes one direction, downhill. Right. And we've seen it all the time. I saw it so many times in education. I'm sure many people have in their industries, where you could tell people have just been there coasting for a long time. You see it in the military even, right?
Yeah, we call it road. We're tired on active duty.
Yeah, exactly.
Road. Yeah.
They're no longer driven by passion. They're no longer pursuing something bigger and better. But I'll tell you this, Martin, you may be about to relate to this. When I stepped out of the school, there were so many good people that I met in that process, even at the school and beyond, who, when they heard what I was doing, they said, "Oh, that's great for you. I'm so happy for you." And I could tell from the look on their face that what they were really saying was, "I'm so glad that's you doing that and not me." Right?
Yeah, you're the one who's taking the gamble. Like, I love that you're taking the big risk.
Yeah, go get them, But I ended up feeling a little sorry for them. I ended up feeling like, oh, I wish you could join me. I wish you could step out and believe that this is whatever your path is. It doesn't have to be my path. Whatever that is, that you're embracing it fully, that you're leaning into it. And I want to be clear about that. That doesn't mean that, I got to leave my job tomorrow or do something. No, wherever you are, I mean, whatever that means for each person is different. But just having the commitment to, I'm gonna figure out what my story is, intentionally cultivate it, intentionally pursue it, and be driven by that. And that's how you can do some really great things.
I can't wait to go back when I edit this episode, and there's going to be some extra notes that I take just on these. There's a black notebook that I carry around. It's a moleskin notebook.
Yeah.
And I've had it for, I think, 10 years or something. And I write down every time I hear like a good quote or like someone has a good thought, or if I read a book, I'll take notes. I'll put the notes or my thoughts from that book inside the moleskin, my journal, but other reflections or good questions I hear. But I know there's going to be, you've already said, I think 3 or 4 different things just in this that apply to me personally for my life in this next season. So I'm excited just to, jot all that stuff down.
Awesome. So that's awesome.
Um, I want to kind of go back to like just books and just more as a
Yeah.
subject. You've helped tell the stories of some of the most influential leaders across business, faith, and culture. And anyone who doesn't know John Maxwell, it's like,
Sure.
like it's like how, right, at
Sure.
this point. Um, but how? And I know. So, in addition to telling stories through books, you've also done podcasts. How would you compare storytelling and podcast versus books?
Yeah. They're different mediums, right? First of all, let me state the obvious. We've developed books from podcasts. Like people who have done podcasts over times, taken that content, found the common
Hmm.
thread, common the structure, turned it into a book around and packaged it around people's ideas. So that's certainly there's interchangeability and connectivity between the two. um, I view podcasts again, depends on the purpose of the podcast, but is podcasting often is all about pulling knowledge from people and expressing that knowledge around that, right? So I think podcasting can really help someone get clear on their own story, even as they're engaging with others. A great example is Lewis Howes. When he started out, he was doing what he loved to do. And when he started the School of Greatness show, and over time, as he began talking to all these experts and people who are great at things, he began to learn and he began to grow. And he's talked openly in his books about his healing himself and all of that. And over time, he began to become someone who then could give back wisdom and on this journey as he combined it with his experiences, right? So
Yeah.
I think podcasting can be a great tool for developing a personal brand, but also relationships with others, approaching with that generous heart and mind through that. So there can be some connection with that. It's just a different medium. You have to remember one of the things that makes them different is books are one-way communication. When you open a book, like we're here on a podcast, right? I see you nodding. Oh, I understand that. I get that, but in a book, I don't get that. If you open the
Yeah.
pages and I'm not there to see, are you nodding? Are you agreeing? Are you about to throw it across the room? What does that look like?
Yeah.
So that's the book communication process. It's totally one way. And so it requires a lot of intentionality on the front end to anticipate what the reader might be thinking, how they're going to interpret that, eliminate the friction, eliminate the confusion. That whole writing and then editing process is where that magic comes in. And that's a powerful thing when you do that well and simplify it, where you can put that out in the world and have confidence that people will understand that. Unfortunately, a lot of people do books and they don't go through that process. And what they put out there is a bit jumbled. It's a bit hard. It makes sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to their reader. And what I like to say is your story is about you, but your story isn't for you, right? It's for your audience. It's for your reader. It's for someone else. And so, if I had written this book from I'm just going to put everything I know, just dump it on a page and throw it out in the world, frankly, it wouldn't help a whole lot of people. I would feel better. It'd be like self-therapy, I guess, but it
Yeah.
wouldn't help people. And so, but instead, I did this whole process with our team, same process everybody goes through when they create a book with us. And it created just a superior reader experience.
It's actually, I want to take my podcast. I've had top military leaders, like the highest of the high of the military leaders. I've had friends, I've had families, I've had Vietnam POWs, I've had
Mm.
Olympic gold medalists. Kurt Warner was releasing a podcast, an episode, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So people from all titans of their respective industry.
sure.
And I've actually been thinking about taking content from my podcast in addition with my own thoughts and reflections from that Moleskin book that I had and
Yeah,
turning that into a book.
yeah,
So when you talked about people turning their podcast into
yeah,
a book,
yeah,
I was like, that really struck a chord with me, or
yeah.
in a good way.
It certainly can be a path. I would suggest you got to get clear on, well, again, I'm going to reference the book. It's in, when you get it, chapter 4 of the book, what I call the story focus question. And I'll go ahead and share it with you here. Your audience probably benefit from this. The very first question I ask in any book project is the same question, which is, all right, great. If somebody, let's pretend your book is done. Somebody's just read your book. They just closed the last cover and they walk away and they forget 99% of everything they just read.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that you would want them never to forget having read that book? And what I found, a lot of people very quickly have clarity on, all right, if they had only one thing, I'd want it to be this. And that does a lot in moving them toward the meaningful message of that book, that unifying message that it's really all about getting this one thing. And then you can build the whole book around that tip of the spear type of concept, right? So I want them to understand this. And when you're clear on that, then you can back out and build around it. So with your podcast episodes, what you wouldn't want is a book that has, oh, we got a bunch of random podcast episodes and my thoughts about them. But what, having, if someone were to even listen to all your podcast episodes or whatever the case may be, what's the one thing that you would want them to remember, that you'd want them to walk away and, hey, I'd never forget that. And then you develop that, and then you can use the podcast episodes and your comments strategically to support that main message, right? But you want that through line coming through. Otherwise, readers end up kind of confused. Like, I thought we were going this direction, now we're going that direction. And frankly, I'm only in chapter 3 and I'm lost, so forget it. I'm not going to keep reading. Right.
Actually, I was reading a book last year, and the book had so many typos and so many grammatical errors, like consistently, even end of a sentence. First of all, they would end the sentence with a preposition.
Yeah.
It's one thing in spoken word, but reading it is just, oh my goodness. And then, anyways, I didn't make it past page like 30. But it's like,
I'll push back a little bit on that. Occasionally you can end sentences and prepositions. You just got to be intentional as to why you're doing it.
But it was consistently,
But to your point, and I'll also say, pick any John Maxwell book, and I've read them all. And we've developed stuff around all of them and all that you will find a typo somewhere in the book. So books are never completely typo-free. But to your point, a lot of times people will self-publish, or they'll do things.
And that's what it was.
That are just like, you kind of cringe, like, oh.
I mean, there was probably, in 30 pages, there was probably, no kidding, like 100 something errors, to the point there'd be multiple sentences where the sentence would end and there'd be 6 or 7 spaces before that and the next word. Like, there was a noticeable gap. Anyway.
So to your point, a book can actually damage you and your brand if it's not done well. Right.
So I've run it. I was at a conference recently, or about 2 months or a month and a half ago, and I saw that person, and that's all I thought about. And they were doing a speaking engagement. I said, I'm not going to go to that speaking engagement. The credibility took a hit. Right.
Everything speaks.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
Actually, it actually kind of leads to this, and you mentioned something a few minutes ago. I talked about me just watching like YouTube videos and listening to you on podcasts, and something else that stuck with me was you mentioning that a book needs to serve more than just the author. It has to connect meaningfully with others. Like, do you mind just further elaborating on helping someone uncover that one thing they want their audience to remember?
One of the other key questions in the book is what I call the ideal audience question. And that is a question and process designed to get clear on who you're speaking to, right? If you don't know who you're talking to, then there's no way you can know if they're going to understand you or resonate with you or anything. So once you get clear on them, then it's about understanding that everything you're saying is to serve them, to meet whatever their need is, whatever problem you're trying to solve. And again, we're talking about nonfiction books. We're not talking about novels here.
Yeah.
Totally fiction. Although you can use fiction in nonfiction. We do fable works and things like that as well to get it done. But so it's that idea, that approaching it with the mindset of getting clear on what you want to say, but then also getting clear on who my audience is and what do they need to hear, right? And then how do I say it in a way that will connect those two and produce the desired results and make it easy. And it takes a lot of intentional thought. Like your story advantage, I was just thumbing through this a minute ago. We really worked hard to make it something that it's a light read. It's not a deep read, but it is a highly practical, inspirational, and effective read. Like it will actually equip you to do a lot of these things. But I wanted something that didn't feel like, I got to spend days and weeks trying to study this and figure it out. I want it accessible. So that's where I came from. It was written for people who are trying to build a brand, trying to build a business, or they already have a business. They're entrepreneurs, they're thought leaders, they're business professionals that are trying to do this and figure out, how do I leverage my story to break through to the next level? And so written with them in mind, in order to do that. So I think that's what it comes around to. It comes around to, how can I put myself in the shoes of the reader, and what will their experience be? Not what I think it will be, but what will it really be? And here's the magic of this, Martin. There's no way, in my opinion, anybody can do that on their own, because you see things from your perspective. You need other perspectives. So another thing I say is, if you want to elevate, you must collaborate, right? You've got to bring other people in to this process who have other gifts and strengths and talent. They can give you that perspective and knock off all that rough stuff around the edges, so that it actually comes out the way you want it to, but better than you ever could have done on your own.
I love that. I actually have that as a bullet point, collaborative writing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's so funny that
Yep.
naturally you've done that a couple of times. I have 4 bullet points, and everything or have as a bullet point, you've just naturally just led into that.
Well, and
So
that's intentional. And here's why. Because I've gone through the process of writing the book, I'm already thinking along those lines, right? And so
yeah,
it gives you, writing a book gives you core content clarity, is how I describe it. That you're super clear on the message and the implications of that, and so it just comes naturally to move into those directions, right? Because that's the way I'm thinking. So,
yeah, and just and I like that term. Just instead of ghostwriting,
sure.
yeah. So how do you Um, I think you already kind of answered this, but I want to ask it maybe in a
Yeah.
different way. But how do you preserve that author's authentic voice
Yeah.
while structuring, refining, and elevating their message? And what are the biggest pitfalls you see when authors try to do it alone? Because we know there's always people that are like, I'm gonna do this alone.
Yeah, I mean, there are a handful of authors who are really gifted writers and have a message to share, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the best of them, even though they bring in people in the process to edit, to give feedback, to refine, to do all that kind of stuff, that's all part of the normal process, right? Any of the great books you've ever read that have made an impact on your life, believe me, a lot of people have spoken into it to make it better. Um, so that's certainly part of it. What was the first part of your question?
Just basically, how do you
Oh,
preserve
yeah,
an author's
yeah,
authentic
yeah.
voice?
Totally, totally. Well, it's very intentional on our part. So, first of all, a lot of the books that you read out there weren't actually written, meaning fingers on a keyboard, putting into words by the author, the big name authors. They have writers behind the scene who are putting that into the written form. What we try to do, though, we don't just try to take people's words and put them on a page. We first of all want to work with them to elevate their message, make it better. How do we add ideas and make it that much better? And then secondly, capturing their voice. Right. And the voice is really a combination of things. It's a combination of listening carefully to the author themselves, because what we're trying to capture is not just the words they use. Yes, we're trying to capture the syntax of that. We're trying to capture the tone, all those kind of things. But we're also trying to capture the feel.
Yeah,
What does it feel like when you're talking to Martin? And then the book, we want that reader to have that feeling as if they're talking to Martin, right? So you can't just take a transcript of someone talking, put it in a book and say, oh, it's done. It needs to be reimagined into that medium form. Again, that one-way communication, you're inside somebody's head, literally, and you get no feedback, right? So you gotta navigate that. And we have a whole process we go through to get it. We do a voice check chapter when we're creating and get really nailing the voice right and getting feedback from the author and all of that. So it isn't like we did. And this is why I make the distinction between ghostwriting and collaborative writing. Because people think of ghostwriting, they tend to think, oh, you're just going to write it for me and you'll give it to me when it's done. Collaborative
yeah.
writing is, we're going to work together. We'll do the writing, but we're going to be very much working together. You're going to be shaping it and giving input along the way in the whole process.
Did you ever watch Seinfeld by chance? I know it's a random question, but I feel like that
Well,
was a couple episodes where
a random question is the perfect kind of question for a Seinfeld conversation.
yeah, I should, yeah, you're 100% right. But I actually just went back and my wife and I recently went back and rewatched the whole series over the course of like 6 months or whatever it was. But
Yeah, yeah,
anyway, I think that was a couple episodes where someone was ghostwriting for for their boss, and
Right.
but they expected I think Elaine just to write the story that it's just like, hey,
Yeah.
there's got to be some Q&A here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
I want to go, man. There's something else that came to mind. You were talking about when you were talking about the book. You want to like a light read and something that it's easy. That's why I liked Admiral McCraven's books, because those are books. His books are ones I often gift to people. One,
Sure.
because of they're very portable. Like it's something that can fit
Sure.
like in your cargo pocket, at least of a military uniform. And two, like, I mean, it's such an easy read that you could read it like in 2 hours or so, if that.
Right.
Like, I mean,
Right.
it's just,
Right.
it's just, I think people are more willing. So I like the books that are, light
Sure.
reads.
Sure.
I want to transition to some lighter topics. These are miscellaneous questions. There's
Sure.
no rhyme or reason, just meant to be fun.
Sure.
But first one is, what is the status of your science fiction novel?
My science fiction novel. I'm not working on a science fiction novel. I am working on a fiction novel, though.
Fiction, my mistake. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I haven't touched it in a while. I thank you for asking. You're the first person to actually ask me that. I actually put it in the book. If you see me, ask me this question. Right.
Next time I see, if I see you, I'm like, Bill, what's the status?
It's actually a historical fiction book. It was inspired by a story in the Bible, of all places, and just a little mention of something. And I thought, well, that's odd. I wonder what the story is behind that. And then I built out the story behind that, and then behind that, right? And it got about 2/3 of the way done, and then it got shelved. And it's been my intent to go back and finish it. So thank you for the reminder. I need to do that.
That is a perfect segue to my next random question. Again, you're like 5 for 5 with this. I'll have a bullet point. I need to keep going. But if you could pick any writer from throughout all of history to be part of Storybuilders, who would you choose and why?
Well, that's a challenging one, because a lot of my favorite writers are like super creative people. They're idea people. I like a lot of the romantic poets, the romantic authors like William Wordsworth or Coleridge or all those kind of guys. But I don't think I'd like them to work at Storybuilders because I don't know how well they would play as a team, quite honestly. They might be like, I want to write my thing. And what we do is it's all about how can we use our talents to help someone else write their thing, right? And so it's different. It's both creative and supporting others. So that's a challenge. I think the writer I would most emulate and love to be part of Storybuilders would be he's no longer with us, but David McCullough. David McCullough just wrote just a fantastic job telling real stories, the stories behind the stories, whether it be Panama Canal or Johnstown flood or 1776 or whatever, all that kind of stuff. He's just such a tremendous, real storyteller.
Which historical figure do you most identify with?
Well, I think it kind of depends on the day. There are several days where a Teddy Roosevelt right behind you on the wall, it feels like him. Other days that it feels more like, I don't, different luminaries who have expressed different thoughts. I think probably the historical figure I would most want to identify with would be Jesus. With my own faith. I mean, I know he's more than a historical figure to me, but that's the person I would most want to be like when it comes down to it. So everybody, to the extent that they would imitate him, that's what I would want to be like.
I love that. That's a great answer. I assume so, but I still wanted to ask anyway. But one thing I found is that writers are usually big readers. Have you ever gotten so desperate for words that you found yourself reading the back of a cereal box, or just so desperate for words that you've looked for at whether it's a cereal box or anything else that you've read just to yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I would read cereal boxes, every morning at breakfast. Like, just turn the box, read it again, just absorbing the words. I never get desperate for words. Actually, I think writer's block is a myth. Like, I think there is no such thing as writer's block. I think that's something we do to ourselves. And I talk about this in the book, how to avoid writer's block and so forth. But I think it's something that we just got to be willing to sit in the chair. Stephen Pressfield talked about this in Turning Pro, I think, right? Sit in the chair, do the work, put words on the page, put whatever's flowing in the moment, start there, and go with it. I think many times we kind of have this idea of, I'll wait for the muse to strike, and I'll just wait for something magical to happen, and then the right words will come out, or I'll do whatever, instead of, no, with what clarity you have, get the clarity you have, and then move forward. I think it was Davy Crockett who said this. I don't know. Davy Crockett or Daniel Boone, somebody like that. I say it all the time, that he said, be sure you're right, and then go ahead. Like, get as clear as you can about being right, and then do it. Right? And then beyond that, don't be so focused on making the right decision. Just make the decision right. Right. That kind of concept of, once you do it, then work hard to make it happen once you've committed to it.
That's a great reminder, even for me, that as I'm moving to this next part of my life, that when you do the work, it's amazing like what good luck people find when they work hard, right? Or when you
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just last couple of questions. If there's a giant billboard with your picture on it for the world to see, and it could be anywhere in the world, what would you want that billboard to say, and where would you want that billboard to be?
My first thought of that is actually a billboard I saw recently commemorating Charlie Kirk and his effectiveness and so forth. And whether you agree or disagree, I think we can all agree that what happened was horrific to him. But I was thinking about that. Like, I saw his face on the billboard, right? And I thought, boy, if that were my face, what would I want that message to be? And I think the message would be, every story matters, especially yours. Right? I think that's the message people need to hear, is that your story matters. Whether you ever write a book, it doesn't matter. If you're breathing, your story matters. You have significance and you have value in the world. Where would I want it to be? I'd want it to be someplace where the people in the greatest need would see it. So I don't know, maybe it's downtown, some city with a homeless group or something where they need the hope most, maybe. But yeah, if I had to choose, it'd be where people most need to hear that every story matters.
I like asking that question. I ask that question in every single podcast, just because it's, and there's a lot of different responses and creative responses. It's always interesting to hear the different places people would place their billboard.
Yeah.
So I like that.
It's cool.
What is one piece of wisdom would you pass on to the next generation of people to help them light their own torch and carry it forward?
Well, I'm going to go back to that same message, that every story matters. Right. So if you find yourself right now in a place where you feel like, I'm kind of coasting, I've had something burning inside of me, but I just keep putting it to the side, your life isn't getting any longer, right? Every day that goes by, our time here is finite. So I would ask, what are you doing about it? I think that's kind of the wisdom that comes with age, as you start realizing that, we are getting older, that clock is ticking. What am I doing about it? So I think my wisdom would be, figure out your story, get intentional about your story. Don't beat yourself up about it. Your failures and all that are all part of it. And then find a way to serve through it and leverage it to help other people and make the world a better place.
How can I best serve you? What can I do for you?
Well, I think you're doing it, right? Helping people hear about what we're up to. I would say, if people, first of all, tell people, get my book, right? Your Story Advantage is available Amazon, yourstoryadvantage.com for bonuses and all kinds of fun stuff.
And I'll have that in the show notes. I'll have the links for, Yeah.
I mean, just encourage people to, if you feel like, hey, I think I might have a story, I might want to do something, just reach out to us at mystorybuilders.com/story and just schedule a call. I mean, let's chat, and we can be of service to you. Great. If not, we'll get out of your way and let you keep doing what you're doing.
Bill, I just want to thank you. This conversation has meant so much to me. There's so many takeaway actions, at least for me. I don't know about everyone else, but I know applicable things to my situation, again, at this point in my life. But Bill, thank you for being a guest on my podcast. This means a lot. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Martin. Well, I applaud you in the courage that your steps that you're taking right now. I've been there, done that. I get it. And yeah, keep moving forward.
Thank you.